Hey folks, it's Tommy Z, and in this video, I want to share with you a bit of insight about how to get your music to stand out and how to actually maximize your chances of finishing your songs. Because one of the things that separates amateurs from pros is amateurs doodle and dabble with loops, and pros try to actually finish stuff. There's a simple framework that I was recently thinking about that I want to share with you. And the framework is as simple as the letters C, D. And those are the two letters that are going to be responsible for getting you to finish your stuff, for the stuff to actually sound like it represents something and not just a loop that anybody else can make. It will get you shipping and publishing the stuff. And what does CD stand for? C stands for concept and D stands for deadline. Now, one of the things I've realized after spending 20 years of my life sitting in a studio creating music for some of the world's biggest brands is that I have been more prolific than ever. Thanks to being a music producer in this industry, I have been forced, quote unquote, to produce over 1,000 original pieces over the last 20 years. And I'm just not sure if this is something that I would do was I left to my own devices. And as I started thinking about the reasons why I actually ship stuff, why I finish stuff, and this stuff usually has an idea, it stands out, it's not just a bland loop, is the fact that in our business, we are asked to create something that has an underlying concept. Before we even get to work, we try to identify this concept. We try to identify a creative direction so that we know consciously what it is that we're trying to create. Now, contrast this with almost every time that we sit down to make music just for ourselves or just like to create a song or to record something. Very often, we're just there to tickle ourselves. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what the idea is. We don't know what the concept is. We always sit down and say, okay, I'm gonna know when I get there. But how are you gonna know if you don't know where you're going? And I think one of the biggest problems right now in music is that everybody has samples and plugins that sound good. And so it doesn't take much effort really to bang out a really well-polished and well-produced loop. But very often, we get stuck in that. We don't take it any further because after being stuck in this loop for like hours or weeks or days at a time, it's almost like our feet are in quicksand. We don't know how to get out of it. And the prospect of like trying to take that thing somewhere and evolve it and unfold it and change from where we are now, it's just too overbearing. Let's just start a new loop. But what happens then is you're basically taking it too easy on yourself. That's why you're stuck with thousands of loops on your hard drive that don't go anywhere. And this is why if somebody were to ask you, please show me the body of your work, what are you gonna do? You're gonna show them a folder with 1,000 loops? What we wanna train ourselves to do is, yes, sometimes exploration without direction, it's a good thing. It's nice to get lost in sounds without having any preconceived notion of where we're going. But folks, more often than not, if you want to be happy with your fruitfulness, with actually shipping something that has a start, a middle, and an end, the best thing I found to do is to actually define a creative idea that's going to govern everything that we do once we're in the session. Before you open an Ableton or a Logic or a Cubase session, I want you to give yourself a theme. Let's say a keyword. It could be sunrise, but just give yourself an idea by which you can calibrate your compass. Then you actually know where you're going. Everything that you're doing, you're able to judge against this governing principle, this governing idea, this key word, this exercise that you gave yourself in basically saying, I'm going to, through sound, try to express the phenomenon, the miracle that is sunrise. And do you see now how you suddenly have a calibrated compass? Now you have a focus. Now you can make decisions. Whereas if you don't have this governing North Star, if you don't have your compass calibrated, You're simply going to spend hours in your studio noodling and doodling and clicking buttons and just tickling yourself. But how many of you are frustrated with doing nothing but doodles and noodles and loops and not actually have a finished project with a theme? I think a lot of artists, that's how they basically help themselves to ship something, and to ship something that doesn't sound faceless, something that tells a story. And this is why it's so important to have a preconceived notion. If you're frustrated with your lack of progress in getting published, I would highly recommend that you give yourself the exercise of having a theme, having a keyword. Notice that suddenly, out of all possible ideas and permutations that could happen in any given session, you now start thinking creatively. You now start thinking strategically. The governing theme is responsible for the decisions you're making. It's not arbitrary anymore. It's not whatever sounds good. You see, this is the problem. Everything sounds good. And you can create songs, you can create EPs, you can create whole albums based on this. What if you were making a soundtrack to a film that doesn't exist? Then you will know, am I getting somewhere with this? Is this really how I feel about the sunrise? Notice that when you're stuck in a loop, you don't know. There is no right answer because there is no direction. If there is no destination, how could you know if you're on the right track or if you're getting lost? So this is why it's so important. And the second word in the CD framework is deadlines. Every time I am working on music and I don't have a concept or a deadline, I'm lost. I'm just gonna doodle for 2 to 3 hours. But when you have a deadline, folks, that's when stuff gets finished. And it not only gets finished, but it's gonna sound like something, because that's the way you intended it to be. And now we're very bad with deadlines. I know that my self-imposed deadlines almost never work. So put some money on it. Tell your friend, hey, I'm gonna write a song about a sunrise. I'm gonna send it to you by this Friday, and if I don't, you can donate $500 to your favorite charity. Do something like that. Promise your mom a song about her. You're not gonna disappoint your mom, are you? Put some kind of forcing function in place to meet the deadline. Something that's gonna hurt. And those two things, I promise you, in your journey as a musical craftsperson, you will finish your songs. The songs will sound like something you're trying to express, which is very important. Unless you want to be a faceless, stock music creator, nothing wrong with that. But if you aspire to tell a story, to express through music something that is important to you, then certainly be intentional about it. Have an idea before you open the session and give yourself a deadline where the consequences of not finishing are going to hurt. And I promise, you're going to start to be prolific, you're going to start to be purposeful in the studio, and you're going to be putting out music, and most of all, you're going to be very happy with yourself. And I'm sure that you're going to move some human beings out there with your music. And isn't that the point? If you enjoyed this video, folks, I think you should watch this one next. I'll see you there.